Hey everybody, my name is George Bailey and I thought I'd give a quick introduction about myself and my family, just because my family is relevant to what it is that we're talking about today. I'm actually from the San Francisco Bay Area, my wife as well. We met on a blind date in Utah. I got married 3 months later. And I was a foreign language teacher at that time. I taught Chinese, Danish, and English, and really enjoyed it. But then one day I decided, you know, I think I want to go into business. How about law school? And so I came here to St. Louis to attend WashU. And my intention was to, do the same thing that most people do when they attend WashU Law, and that is, come here and then get a job elsewhere and then move on. But my wife and I have a child. We have 4 children, but our oldest child, Joseph, he's just turned 12, has autism. And the resources here, I don't know if you know this about St. Louis and this region, but the resources here for children with autism are phenomenal. Not to mention the Zoo Museum District and all else there is for families to do here, and we were just sold. That was back in 2010. I've been here ever since, and I have every intention of staying here and dying. Not too soon, but that is my intention. I just love this place. So in any case, I serve on the board of directors for the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, and it was during that time that I met the gentleman in the top left-hand corner. His name is Gary Kelman. He and I both speak Mandarin. He does a lot of business in China, and on one of his trips to China, he stayed in one of these nap pods. Have any of you guys ever seen these nap pods? Have you ever seen like these, maybe you'll see them at Japanese airports, or you'll see them in Chinese office spaces and things like that. He stayed in one of these and thought that they were a total trip. He's like, and he just kept on chewing on this idea of using them in the United States. He came back to the United States and he met up with his friend who is in Florida, who works as an executive for Walt Disney World Resort. And his friend said, hey, we are building a Battlestar Galactica themed living space, and we have no idea what to do about beds. And so Gary, remembering this experience staying in one of these futuristic sleep pods, said, oh, I got it. I know exactly what we're going to do. He ordered a crate of 13 of these pods. He sold 6 of them to his friend, and then brought the other 7 back here to St. Louis, where we have them in a little showroom in a pro shred office. And so for the last few months, we have been inviting everybody to come in and look at these pods and say, like, what are these things good for? Like, do you see anything? And they would give us the usual, like, okay, what about airports? What about corporate office spaces? What about micro hotels? What about hospitals? What about police stations? And they had all of these really great ideas. But then somebody said, well, what about sensory rooms? And if you know anything about sensory processing disorders, you'll know that most children with autism have them. And that in this setting, for example, I see people walking by, I could hear music a moment ago, I can hear the fan going on, and you can hear these things and see these things as well, and yet you're able to still lock in on me because you know how to filter all of this external environment to lock in on the thing that you want to hear. But children with autism cannot do that easily, and as a matter of fact, they feel very overwhelmed, and when their senses are overloaded, they scuttle off to a secure place where they can decompress. And so when somebody said sensory rooms, that's when a major light bulb went off for me. I thought, oh my gosh. So I called my wife, I said, hey, can you bring Joseph in tomorrow and just have him check this out? So Joseph came to our showroom the next day, and we walk him in. We didn't prep him, we didn't tell him what we were even looking for. We didn't tell him that there were pods there, we didn't tell him about sleep or anything like that. He walks in, looks, says, wow, and then gets into the first pod, closes the door, and lies down. And I'm thinking, oh, this is cool. Okay, this is really cool what we're doing right now. And so I start calling up every autism organization in the region, and every doctor I can get a hold of, and every sleep doctor, and everybody who knows anything about autism, and saying, hey, what if we found a really secure place where kids with autism could sleep better? And I wanted to learn all about, is there a need? Is there really, something there? And here are some of the things that they told me about autism. The first thing that I learned is that 1 in every 59 children, according to the CDC, has autism. And that number is projected to increase to 1 in 40 in the next several years. We don't know if that's because we're getting better at diagnosing it. We don't know if that's because there are more cases. We just know that it's increasing and that it's a big number and that it's affecting a lot of kids. Even more important, and this is the thing that really, really hit me, 80% of children with autism have a chronic sleep disorder. And 90%, and this is up to, I should say, up to 90% of children with autism have a sensory processing disorder. So these two things merge on this child to make sleep really difficult. And I knew that with my own kid because I'd be up late and I could hear this all over his room, just stepping about. My kid does not know how to tread lightly. There's none of that. Like, I was in marching band, so I can, I know how to do that, and I'm good at that, but my kid's not good at that. And I know some of you are thinking, well, all kids have a hard time sleeping. I'm telling you, I have 3 other children who are neurotypical, and it is not the same. It's an intense experience for him, and it's an intense experience for us, and the fallout is that you have children who during the day have a hard time behaving well because they're not well rested, and we know that lack of sleep plays a role in this. They're not getting as much out of their therapy, and we know that lack of sleep plays a role in this. I'm not saying it's the whole enchilada. I am saying it is a significant and part that we can do something about, maybe. So the other part of this fallout is that parents are also just wiped out, and I'm not sure what happened to the airplane. Did it just play through?
Maybe.
BJ. Got it? Well, in any case, what you got back there, I don't know what you saw because I was just clicking through, but there's a picture of a kid who's in distress and getting comfort, and there's a picture of a man who's just, has a book on his face and he's just laid out because he is just wiped out. So it's slideshow down at the bottom. There we go. Yes, right there. So we know that this has some really negative effects. And I don't like losing sleep. I'm sure you don't like losing sleep. Part of it's just part of the game. Any kids are going to make you lose sleep, but it's a little bit harder when you have a kid with autism. And there are other disorders as well. Let me make sure this doesn't just... That's starting to play on its own. There we go. Okay, so the other thing that we know is that it is not merely physiological. We know that there are at least some other factors, environmental factors, and if they are environmental factors, that means that we can do something about it. And Autism Speaks has this wonderful resource, this toolkit that gives recommendations on some of the things that we can do for kids with autism to help them sleep better. In full disclosure, I was just asked to sit on the board of directors for the local chapter of St. Louis's Autism Speaks. It's a very large and very well-respected autism organization worldwide. And they say you need dark. If you're not getting dark, get heavier curtains. Or look at the kid's environment. What can you do? You need it to be quiet. Okay? They're very sensitive to noise. They're very sensitive to temperature. And if you have a white noise generator or a HEPA filtration system, which also has the added benefit of cleaning up the air in an area, then that's also very good for helping these kids to sleep. And I'm looking at these, I don't know what you see when you look at those factors, but I'm thinking like, we already can control all of these things. A matter of fact, the current generation of these sleep pods does just that in most of these cases. But we start thinking, what can we do to build a better pod? So we're working on the next generation of sleep pod. As you can see here, these are some of the different models that we're considering putting together and trying to put together a new aesthetic, something that looks a little bit more American. We can change the colors, we can change the panels, things like that. We can work with these, but the point is that we're really trying to reimagine what this might look like in somebody's home. If we were to put it in a kid's bedroom, what would it look like? Now on the left you can see what it might look like in a bedroom, on the right you can see what it might look like in an office space. We have contemplated that type of a direction, though we're not going in that direction right now. It's just good to see what, we like kind of preempting, seeing if they're stackable. What if you have 2 kids with autism, which I have seen? And I'll even go further and say that all of my kids want one of these bad because they all want to sleep in a spaceship. Okay? Every last one of them. And every kid that we've ever had in our showroom showing them the current generation of zPod, they're all saying, oh my gosh, this is awesome, can I have one? They're drawing pictures of them, asking for them on their Christmas list, things like that. So now we can make it a little bit more aesthetic for the child with autism. We've also re-envisioned the panel. I don't know if you've seen the panel on the old model, but it's dials and switches and things like that. We want to use AI technology and smart technology to be able to control all of the environmental factors on this right here. We've actually done a lot of this design already. We actually already have the tech and the tech understanding to be able to make this happen, but we could affect all of these environmental factors, and I love the Z panel. We have an AI component as well as a avatar that we've created as well that could interact with the child and help them to go to bed or whatever. And we're focused on autism. That's the market that we feel like right now we want to really get out. But there's a lot of potential here. What if we went to ADHD? Because a lot of kids with ADHD also have a disproportionate problem with sleeping. They're all hyped up. I know that because I'm one of them. What about OCD? What about PTSD? Okay, and other markets. And as I said, any kid who looks at one of these wants one of these because it's awesome. And we're really excited about what we're doing. We are fortunate to have some really incredible team members. I'm not on there. Actually, I'm the guy in the middle. But the team, it comes with a skill set of logistics and manufacturing and AI and investment and exit strategy, things like that. So we feel like we're doing something really exciting and we want to make a really big change in the way that people perceive sleep. My invitation to you guys, and what we're really looking for is, do you know somebody who is affected by autism? Particularly, do you know people who are affected by autism who are movers and shakers and who want to help us make this happen? I would love for you guys to come out, see the tech that we already have. We can show you a vision of what it is that we're working on that goes far beyond what I described for you today in our limited time. But this is my invitation. I hope that you'll come up to me afterwards, shake my hand, take my card, I can take yours, and then at a time that's convenient for you, come out. We're in Overland, which is really close to the airport, and we would love to see you. Thank you very much for your time.
Wait, hold on. Oh, there's protocol here.
You're right. I didn't know about this either.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait for the microphone. We want the camera to be able to pick you up and talk loudly because the microphone's here.
I actually have two questions.
Yeah.
And the first one is about the pod itself. What is the air movement like? What is the air movement like? Because I picture myself in it getting very claustrophobic.
Yes.
And so is there any opportunity for fixing that portion of it and making it a little bit more breathable for people like that?
Great question. A lot of the fears that people have in looking at these, children don't have it, but adults do, and there may be adults who may want to try this out, is what about the air movement, okay? So first of all, as it currently exists, there are fans that help the air, circulate and whatnot, but we are easily able to install and plan on installing HEPA filtration in every single pod to keep the air clean. We've talked with people who felt like, well, I feel like it could get really stuffy in here. We're going to remove that with both fans and HEPA filtration systems. Great question. And what was your second?
The second one is, have you guys figured out what the affordability looks like for families purchasing these pods for their children?
Great question. What about affordability? So there's kind of two parts to this question. One is that the price of this pod right now, if we were to sell it retail, we'd go somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000. So it's not, you're going to have your early adopters who are going to come in and they're going to feel like they can drop that type of money on something like that a little bit more easily. Wouldn't be so much of a problem there. But one of our things that we're trying to do is we want to do research. We've actually talked with a number of autism doctors, sleep doctors, to see what would we need to do to put together a sleep study, which would then allow us to be able to approach insurance companies and then say, what about a prescription pod? There are prescription iPads out there for children with autism. And so surely, if we can demonstrate that this has a positive impact on their sleep and the parents' sleep incidentally, then we would be able to approach insurance companies.
Next question.
Right here.
All right. Oh, hold on. There you go.
So what's the competition? And second question, do you think this would work in schools? Because the school nurse might need one.
Wonderful questions. Okay, so the first one was, what's our competition? Competition is that there are, for example, there are micro hotels popping up every once in a while, airports that have pods like this popping up, and even if you go to corporate office spaces in Silicon Valley, I was just there this last month, you'll see like little nap pods where you can lie down in a chair and then you have a shield that comes over your head. People say they feel a little bit awkward about that particular one because they don't feel covered, their legs are just sticking out there and vulnerable, and they feel like their colleagues are walking by and seeing them and saying, oh, so-and-so is just kind of doing his or her own thing. So all of the competition is focused very much on kind of the outside, out-of-home world. In England, I have seen beds where you have kind of a curtain that drops down on all four sides of the bed. It's not tech-driven at all, not even remotely, but it is what I would consider competition, because of the idea of creating a secure space for your child, that it doesn't hold out the sound, doesn't do anything for temperature, doesn't do anything for light, and because they're not really heavy curtains and they have some like windows and stuff like that in them. So yeah, there is competition. I would say that given the amount of research that we've done and the connections that we've made in the autism world, that we're probably 6 months to a year out ahead of that competition, but that's a really good question. Your second question was, give that to me again.
Having the same technology in schools, so nurses can...
So the second question is, what if we could put these in schools? That's a great question. Certainly I would welcome something like that. I imagine that there are instances at a school, just like there would be in a sensory room, where children feel overwhelmed. For example, you'll see in baseball stadiums increasingly, and basketball stadiums in Utah, for example, they've got a room where if your kid feels overwhelmed, he or she can go to the sensory room and kind of just decompress. So yeah, I could see that happening in a school. I'm not sure if there is as much need for the privacy unless you're talking about kids who need that space to decompress. But yeah, I could see some room for that. That's a great question. Anybody else?
Two things, one about design and one about distribution. Have you looked into licensing R2D2 or BB-8 for the design of this thing? Or possibly Baymax from Big Hero 6? That's the first one.
Yes, I love this question. Absolutely would look into that. That to us is one of the exciting things, is that whichever design we go with, we're going to make sure that the panels are interchangeable so that children can stylize it according to their preferences. I think that that's essential. That's part of the essential experience, is feeling like you have some control. I think that it still has a very futuristic look, and I think that there's a lot of room for that.
Okay.
Yes.
Then having to do with distribution, early adopters, high-end, people with money, FAO Schwartz,
Yep.
Sharper Image, any of those. There are places where you can get a Ferrari for your kid to sleep in. There's, that's exactly the market, and they would grab this.
Oh yeah, and even we've been told that we should get inside the Neiman Marcus catalog. Would be like another place. I love those ideas.
Oh, and the Sky Miles, the Sky
Yes.
airplane magazines.
You got another question right there?
So my question is, when children start off in these pods and sleep throughout their childhood in this particular environment, is there a way when they become an adult for them to be able to kind of graduate out of it at some point? Like specifically children with autism and sleep in a more typical bed, or would this be kind of like a lifelong thing for them?
This, we've given some thought to this, and that's kind of a challenging question because we don't know really down the line what's going to happen. If they're, we're starting to show that, kids love being inside this space. They don't have the same kind of, for me, the idea of walking into my bedroom, particularly when I'm married, and sleeping in a pod does not have like a ton of appeal initially. And yet, and I'll show you a story to kind of prove my point, and yet there are reasons why I would kind of love that. And I could imagine that kids would either grow into these things and just love them, which for me is not a problem. We're targeting kids with autism right now, but as I said in the beginning, there is room for expansion in the market. And if they really grow accustomed to and love this, because it's like, well, when I sleep outside in my dorm, my roommate's up at 3 o'clock doing homework, or when I do this, then I hear everything that's going by, or I don't get the same temperature control because my room's too big. The way I see it, one of the technologies that is coming down the line, and this is a very long answer to a very short question, I apologize. One of the technologies coming down the line are mattresses that have EEG technology in them. And if you go to sleep study centers, they will connect you to 18 wires and then tell you to go to sleep for the night. And now, anybody here is going to be like, yeah, 18 wires, good luck. Oh, I'm so comfortable. So that's the incentive to put them in the mattress. We're thinking, what if in the next 10 years when this technology comes out, we know who's making it and everything like that, we put it in the bed, hook it up to AI technology, and then start getting this really constant feedback loop on how we're sleeping given the environment. My best night of sleep was in California 4 years ago at Laguna Beach at a surf and sand hotel where I was right next to the beach. And I thought I wasn't going to be able to sleep at all because of the waves. I was thinking those don't turn off at me. And so all of a sudden I go to sleep, and with the boom of the ocean and the smell of the sea and all that, I was out. I was out. And I keep on thinking to myself, if it were possible, I would want that night of sleep the rest of my life. And if we work towards that, then I would say the answer is no. They're going to want to stay at night. But that's a kind of visionary, I don't know, crazy thing to say. So, anybody else? Back there?
Mike.
Danger.
It was a sound, lighting, and amenity set thing, which you kind of touched on.
Yeah.
Whether it's a kid that just wanted it because it was nice to have in the room, or has a theme, or if it's actually for like a deprivation situation, sound and lighting. So we talked a lot about the introduction of blue light into our lives and how that impacts our sleeping. First question is, how does this have any benefit when it comes to helping the average person or child sleep better by reduction of that type of lighting? To sound outside. I know growing up in the South, we are no strangers to large storms, and especially during springtime and fall time where we have really big storms that come through. It's really hard to, once you catch one tornado, it's a part of your psychology to be afraid of storms as a kid and keeps you awake. So two, is there any kind of sound buffering or anything is that benefit? And three, amenity sets. If you're a kid and you have if you want to have like an alarm or something, are those things built into it, or is that something that's outside of it?
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to address each of those in order: light, sound, amenity sets. As for light, these are LED lights that we're using. The blue light, you're just going to need to make sure that your kid doesn't go in there with a phone or anything like that. Blue light is, of course,
It doesn't emit a blue light.
It does not emit a blue light. And that's key. That's really important, because if you have blue light, then that's going to, make it too difficult. Matter of fact, the idea of having the panel that comes outside of the pod was one that was had by people in the autism community, because our concern and their concern was because the panel is on the inside right now, kids would just be fiddling with it all night and whatnot. And so with a panel that's on the outside that the parents can they can be the ones to control it. And this goes to your question about graduating, that over time you could eventually give the child control over the panel as they understand what helps them sleep and not. But as for lighting, you can have control of the lighting. You can have a little night light in there. Children, if you're going to have a night light, it needs to be steady the entire time. We've also had the idea that we can time the lights to have them dim on. And this is possible in the next generation. We already know how to design it. Dim the lights on gradually, like, before the sun comes up, so that it's better for the circadian rhythm. And this is important because think about, I've lived in Denmark before, and in the winter, the night night comes at about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and in the summer it comes about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And that type of light all year long is brutal, and the idea that I can control that in the pod is a lot more appealing in that sense. On that one, you said also sound. There are more soundproof models that we can create by putting more like styrofoam in as insulation and things like that. The one concern we have there and the one limitation we have is if you have no sound, you have no air. We're not fans of that. So, there has to at least be some allowance of sound, but there are a lot of things we can do. And the science of how we create no sound is something that we're going to constantly be on top of, because that, of all of the different environmental factors, that's like one of the big two, you named the other one light, that we have to be on our game for. We can make it pretty silent, but still there will be limitations. It's going to be a lot better than just sleeping in your bed with the window right next to you. And then the third question was amenities. What was the question about the amenities again?
So you can dress it up however you want, right?
Yeah.
So if you really want to have a TV in it,
yes.
you could.
Yeah.
I slept in the ones in Tokyo.
And they have a TV inside.
TV, right? It's like full on experience. You like go to your pod and everything, except for someone bringing you a meal. But I don't know if that was in the direction that these things are going, to where in other settings they would have amenities that remind you to it's time to go to bed, or like an Alexa wakes you up, things like that.
We want to make the pod modular, meaning that we want people to manipulate it however they want. And so if they want a television in there, sure, I would never let my kid put a television in there. But at the same time, if somebody else wants to have their kid put one in there, or if someone else as an adult wants to have a television in there, I'm kind of like customer's always right mentality. Make it possible, even if it's an accommodation. I'd rather have the base pod, which is what we specialize in, and then allow those modalities, and those different perks to be things that other people can introduce in and whatnot. But we want to make them possible and empower anybody who wants to make those possible. Yes?
Okay. First of all, can a child get locked in it? And what is the fire rating?
Say that. Well, I didn't catch that. It was like,
I said, can a child get locked in it? And what is the fire rating?
Yes, okay. So as for whether or not a child can get locked in it, no. It has no locks on the door. And there are models that have locks on the door for like micro hotels and stuff like that. We would not put that on a bed that we would put in someone's home, just because that introduces too many questions and too many problems. So no. And if you were, this is one of the reasons why we like the idea of getting people in the showroom to see them, because if you see the door, you're like, oh yeah, I could take that thing off. Even a kid could probably kick it out with enough force. That's one really good question. On fire, so the plastic that we're using is a special plastic. The one that's actually already on the pod would take 15 seconds even just to smoke if you held a lighter right up to it. So it passes all of the American kind of fire concerns and whatnot. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. Suppose you have a fire in that house.
Yes.
A kid is sleeping in there.
Good question. So on that case, so fire in the house, you'd want to have a fire alarm component to the app, which is something that we've talked about. That would make it possible for the kid to know, hey, there's an emergency. And at the end of the day, you're going to want the parents to know as well. So we have little alarms and things like that. What if the kid gets out of the pod? What if just so that they know, elopement is a big problem with children with autism. They'll just walk off in the middle of the night. And so one of the ideas we have is to be able to notify parents of that. We would effectively use the same technology to notify parents. They have their smoke alarm, they hear something, they go and they get their kids, but also have a smoke alarm inside the pod so that they can know that as well. Great concern.
Are you familiar with Temple Grandin's squeeze machine?
Oh yes, that was part of the reason why when someone said sensory rooms, I had this kind of big, oh my gosh, I got to really look at this. I'd seen the Claire Danes movie about Temple Grandin, and this is one of the reasons people would ask me, wait, won't kids with autism feel really tied up in there? And I'm like, yep, they sure will, and they will love it.
have you considered a mattress that would cuddle the child?
Imagine. No, I've not. That's a great one. Yeah. Thank you very much. I love those ideas. That's great.
What
Is
is,
your primary focus? I'm sorry. Is your primary focus on the autistic market due to the history of sleep pod attempts in the United States? Do you have an understanding of sleep pod attempts in the United States, etc.?
Great question. There have been some little attempts in the United States, and it hasn't really caught on yet because we don't have the right environment. You look at Tokyo and Hong Kong, for example, where sleep pods are doing quite well, nap pods. What you have there are high-density populations that are overcrowded and real estate that's overpriced. And so San Francisco, where we've been, has that same problem, but their zoning laws make it really difficult. And there are logistical problems that make sleep pods in commercial areas very difficult. Not impossible. And as you saw from some of our pictures, that's not beyond the scope of what we would want to do. But we found that the logistical challenges for children with autism were much less because you're putting it in someone's home. Keeping it clean is not much of a problem because the buyer is responsible for that. And no one, to our knowledge, no one is doing what we're doing. I've talked with a ton of people in the autism community, doctors in Australia, doctors here in the United States, and no one is really contemplating what we're doing. Every single one of those experts was like, yeah, I'd be on for a sleep study on this easily. We also feel like because the autism sleep proclivities are so varied, it forces us as a company to think to be very agile, to cater to all of the different sleep proclivities, which for us says, if we can help kids with autism sleep, we can help anybody. And that's one of the reasons why we're focusing there, because our passion. Yeah.
All right, over here.
How large is your addressable market?
Very good. This one, I had a little debate with my partner about this the other day. He thinks that it's somewhere around 3 million, when just coming out, just 3 million kids. And I thought that it was closer to maybe 1.29. So we're still, that's a pretty big range of numbers, I recognize, so we're still debating what that number is, but it's pretty sizable. We're starting with autism and branching out from there because we believe that the real market is kids all over the United States.
All right, Mary, you've got last question.
Wait, hold on. Hey, you know the rules.
what are sales currently?
Okay, so we've sold the 6 in Florida, and we have started just now to say, okay, we're going to sell the ones in the showroom so that we can start moving some of the ones that currently exist, but we haven't sold any of those yet. We've talked about the possibility that if someone buys one of the ones in the showroom right now, that we would give them a discount on the upcoming pod. This is mainly a new technology that we'd be introducing in.
Okay, do they take standard twin-size sheets?
Yes, they are standard twin-size sheets.
It's a big one for moms who have to change beds. Okay, sounds good. Get testimonials from anybody who uses them.
Absolutely, I agree.
There you go, man. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.